Salam alaikum. Bonjour. Hola. Hello. Guten Tag. Just a few words about me. I'm a curious optimist. I think that's kind of the two words that connect me. And as I said, I was born in France. I grew up in Germany. I lived in, I worked, studied in the USA. I worked in Senegal, in the UK, in Spain, in Mexico. I've been quite a few. I've been lucky, but these were mostly by choice, and I want to honor that privilege, that I've had. But I also did a 2 year world tour, backpacking around the world to meet, find, and interview optimistic people. And the idea was like I would recognize them. There's something about optimistic people. Usually I smell them. No, someone was talking about smell. There's something about optimistic people. You can feel them. And so I would meet optimistic people at the train station and the market. And I would talk to them, interview them, and then spend a few days with them in their home, on their farm, and and I did that for 2 years. And today, I studied different things too. I didn't just travel. I was a pre-med, so I started medical school, and then I switched to public policy. And then I've been an artist my whole life. And and I was really struggling to because I'm someone who likes integration in that sense. I love having lots of plates spinning at the same time, but they need to come as a whole. Otherwise, my brain struggles. And so my integration came to become an art therapist. It's a profession which I really love, and it gives me the possibility to be more than one thing because I'm a clinician. Right now, I'm full time in an addiction recovery clinic, but the past few years, I was in palliative care, pediatric and adults, accompanying people and their families in their last days and months. And, my specialty is psycho-oncology, which is the psychology of cancer. And I've been working, mostly with that, but, and also worked with refugees, and it was an honor, and I continue to do that and as much as I can, and people who are on the autism spectrum. But it's something that's been, what I think really drove my life is the idea of, integration. And so I became very interested in this the idea of distress, and distress, it's a medical term, but it's a very, embodied integral experience that comes with cancer. And as you see, like there's a lot of symptoms and they're not always present, but that's kind of, it can go from being in pain and fatigue to not sleeping to losing weight or gaining weight, nausea, not being able to think straight, we call it brain fog, anxiety, but it goes also like feeling irritable, hopeless, feeling guilty, feeling fear, not being able to have sex. I mean, that's a huge part also we need to talk about intimacy and how intimacy is impacted by, treatments, relationships being struggling, not being able to do well at school or at work, losing your job or not being able to do the job you want, the stress, financial stress. Not, many countries, healthcare is not free as it should be because it's our right, I think, to be treated when we're in pain. Identity, ability, our belief system. Some people lose their faith over illness. Some people find it, but some people lose it, and that's a huge, like switch in their mind about who they are and their identity. And of course, death. I mean, we know. I mean, even though it's where we're all heading. The idea is like it happens a long time from now and with some sort of a, like not a choice but at least, like I don't want an illness to choose for me. So this is really what I became interested in, from a more medical perspective. It was like distress, no? And then, art therapy, I'd like to, I don't know how much of you know about art therapy. I know creative therapies are in the room, but, but art therapy specifically. But when I think about art therapy, I see this, you see this electric thing in the mid here on the left. What I like about it is like it's the scream from Munch, actually a Norwegian painter. And it's like, but here the scream becomes energy, right? You see how it's coming out, and you would be able to just plug something there, and you could, put your toaster or your whatever it is. So the idea that somehow from this, instinctive scream, anger, fear, we create energy with. And then on the right, you've got those two circles of like, art is with the connection between feeling alone and feeling connected. I think it's not just about that primal scream, that energy, but making sure that energy that somehow connects me to someone else. Because, we know that, that's where real pain exists, is when I'm not able to be attuned with you, when I feel alone in a room full of people. That's what Carl Jung used to say, right? So this is kind of the mindset here. And, when the way we see this, we art therapists, it's like it's the triangular relationship. It's like there is the art therapist and the patient, and then we have the art and the creative process. And I love this painting by Kandinsky because you see it's not just a triangle. Many things are happening in this triangle, right? There's like, shapes and forms and sticking out. But, it's that thing. It's like we open the space. When it's me and you, it's A to B. And Einstein, always said, it's about, finding the, C somewhere else in the space, right? So this is what we got this amazing chance that we have the creative process to create that point C, which opens the frame, which enables things to happen in. Okay, this is very important to the way I think about the work we do. And one important aspect of what I was seeing in my work when I was in Mexico City is like somehow when I was engaging in creative therapies, with patients, so much self-disclosure happens. So self-disclosure is when I tell you something intimate about myself. And let's be honest, as therapists, I don't know how many of you are therapists in the room or, work in, that kind of field, but it's like, if you don't tell me how you feel, it's going to be really hard for me to work with you. And so what I was seeing, is that through the creative process, through the humor, through everything, the embodiment of the practices we're doing, people were revealing themselves. And not just verbally, they were just, acknowledging. Someone was saying how tired they felt, like that is a form of self-disclosure. And in a room full of excited people for a conference, admitting, what, I feel extremely tired is extremely brave. It shows a lot of trust. And, this is what I really like, how do I do to connect, how do I this self-disclosure, shared with other people? Like how do I find a way to accelerate that, to scale that? Because I was seeing it happen. And not to, take something intimate and then share it with the whole world. That would be a breach of, of trust. But when it's really relevant information, because it could be life or death in terms of a treatment, in terms of symptoms that are really making someone unhappy, that's important. So I don't. I'm sure this word has been shared a few times over in this festival. It's still something I think it's good to be repeated. The word poiesis, which is not easy to pronounce, at least for me. Poiesis, poise. I mean, boom, boom, boom. I don't know. Like that helps me to remember things. The definition is like a creative response sorry, to what impacts us, allowing what emerges to become visible so we can reshape and adapt. And really, that's kind of the core, not only of expressive arts, but when we talk in psychology about illness, about serious illness, what really matters to us is like, is the patient's adjusting? Are they able to cope with the situation? Because it's not something that you can choose. You know what? I just don't want to be sick today. You still, unfortunately, we wish it happened this way. But what we care for very much so is like, is the person adapting to the situation? Are they mobilizing their resources to connect to what's possible? And so this is really, and I love this painting, which is by a fantastic female painter too, Remedio Varios, where you see like they find themselves in that little box. I think there's something very powerful about this image. And it's like, how do I adapt to, a part of myself being left in the box, like that healthy part of me, that part of me that cannot do the things that I used to love. Like, is there a way that I can still be me when parts of me are no longer there? Whether it's my identity or organs. I worked a lot with women who, had mastectomies or their uterus removed, and how do you live on when a very important part of you is no longer there? An organ that maybe you never thought about, but now it's all you can think of. It's no longer there. And so that's part of what we do when we work in those fields. It's like, how do I help you? Not forgive and forget, not move on, like someone we're talking about. No, it's not about moving on. It's about how do I accept, adapt, make meaning, honor, celebrate, and all at the same time. Also, I hate stages. I hate models that tell me like this is stage one, this is stage two. My mind doesn't like that. My mind likes, to know that everything is circular, that we keep, we can be in stage this and then come back to stage that, and all of a sudden we have our own stage that just opened. And I know that it's part of I'm also a researcher and a scholar. We want to make sense with what is. Our wonderful speaker before said it's hard for us to be in this liminality. We want certitude. We want to know in which stage of grief we are. We want to know in which stage of the illness we are. We want to know which stage of the marriage we are. And oftentimes we do not know. And this uncertainty is very difficult for us. So art gives us this possibility, symbolism, metaphoric work, poetry, movement, because words even though they help us, they make me connect to you today, they also separate me from you. One, because I use a language maybe some of you are very not comfortable with. Second, because the words I choose, maybe for you, they're colonized by other meanings. Someone put in the group, sometimes group therapy is not healthy for because groups were so damaging. I agree with that. The minute I start to speak, we connect and we separate, and your mind will go somewhere else with it. So imagery, I mean, also, I'm thinking of our colleagues who are not able to see, and that's a whole different story. But for most of us, imagery is very the key that we understand the world. This is how our thinking is shaped. So this is a very important part of this. But like, how do I help people and myself adapt to what is? And that adaptation can be, cognitive behavioral theory, and I'm going to breathe every time something, but it can also be every time I feel fear, I will sing that song. I think that's very important to mobilize all the resources that are good for you, right? I think our wonderful speaker before was talking about humming and lamenting, and I've done that. When I was not a mom at the time, and here I was helping women whose child had just died, hours before, from years of fighting cancer. What can I say to that woman? What do I know about her pain? All I could do was take them outside and we would sit in the park of the hospital and I would remove their shoes. Sorry, it makes me a bit sad. Their socks, and I would massage their feet. I didn't know them, but that's the only thing I knew. I would, of course, ask consent, and but there was that's the only relief I could find in those moments was to make them sit on the ground and put their hands on grass, and I would massage their feet, and we would cry together, and that's all that we could do in that moment, and I think that's important to see that this reaction can be so many different things. So now, from poises to innovation, when the creative response becomes a creative invention. I really love this drawing. I don't know. I I feel seen. Like I wish you could see what's going on in my mind as I'm talking. But it looks a bit like that. It's kind of messy, but it's kind of fun too. Like Pinocchio. When he in the movie Pinocchio, when all the things go on, like all the cuckoos, all the little toys. That's kind of my brain. And my husband is exhausted at the end of the day. It's like he's like, Marie, stop thinking. But that's kind of what's going on. And so I think that, if you are expressive therapist, or if you love expressive therapies and you apply it for yourself, you are really just very small steps away from being an innovator already. Because if you're able to elicit a creative response in yourself, then you're able to do a creative invention.